Hello, and welcome to this webinar on Focus on Geothermal Energy for the Weekend. We're very pleased to have you on board here in this webinar series of Enerchange and Think Geoenergy. I'm very pleased to have with me today Cannur Bozkurt from Enerchange in Turkey. Cannur, many people in the industry know her, has been very much involved in geothermal in Turkey and elsewhere, and has been a great spokesperson for Turkish geothermal development. Before with Transmark Renewables in Turkey, then lately with TAQA, she has been heavily involved in pushing geothermal development. She's now working with Enerchange and is heavily involved in that. She's also the former editor of Geothermal Haberler, a Turkish geothermal news platform of Think Geoenergy. And we're very pleased to have her on board for this webinar today to present on the current status of affairs in the geothermal market in Turkey. And with that, over to you, Cannur.
Thank you very much, Alex. It's a pleasure to join again IGC webinars. Today, briefly, I will talk about the current situation and the opportunities of Turkish geothermal market. And I definitely would like to start with a brief history of geothermal energy in Turkey. It in fact goes to the Paleolithic ages. In BC, the geothermal resources are mainly used for purposes such as health and cooking and bath from the Hittites, Romans, all around Anatolia. The thermal springs, which were used by the Seljuks, Ottomans, and Turks, and some of them are still in use around. In coming to 1920s, let's say, in 26, the first law on thermal waters came in first in Turkey. In 35, the Mineral Research and Exploration Institute, shortly MTA, was established. And by the establishment of MTA, preparing and renewing hot and thermal water inventory of the country has kicked off. In the 1960s, MTA General Manager gave importance to the subject and carried out geological research, and international cooperation projects were initiated. As a result of the efforts, in 62, the first geological studies were carried out in Izmir, Balçova region. Following year, the first geothermal drilling was carried out in the same region. And in 66, Turkey was a country with many publications on thermomineral resources and geothermal energy studies. Coming to 67, Western Anatolia and Denizli Kızıldere Geothermal Exploration Project was started by MTA and UNDP. The year after, the first high-temperature geothermal reservoir was discovered in Kızıldere region at a temperature of almost close to 200 degrees Celsius at 540 meters. Coming to the 74, the first geothermal electricity pilot power plant in Kızıldere with a capacity of 0.5 megawatt and the first 1,000 meter square greenhouse facilities were established. Before 70s ended, the first draft of the geothermal law was prepared by MTA. And 80s. In 82, Yermencik and Tuzla fields were discovered following successful drilling operations. The temperature of those fields is around 232 and 174 degrees Celsius. This is also the year where the first geothermal regulation was included in the mining law of the country. A year after, the first geothermal heating system with the first in-hole heat exchanger was established in Izmir. 2 years later, in 84, first geothermal power plant commissioned in Denizli Kızıldere with 15 megawatt installed capacity by Turkish Electric Institution, a state company, with single flash turbine technology. Kızıldere was a field with high carbon dioxide production, so the first carbon dioxide factory was established at the site of the power plant within the following 2 years. I can say that this is the first Cascade utilization example of Turkey. In 1987, the first geothermal central system heating facility started in Balıkesir, Gönen. And in early 90s, the scaling problem was almost solved, which led to an increase of investments for heating applications. Heating applications became widespread in the 19th. Coming to 2000s, in 2003, a financial mechanism started discussion. İller Bank, which is a state bank, started research and funding activities for geothermal projects. 2005, we, as Turkey, hosted World Geothermal Congress in Antalya. The next year, the first private sector power plant and binary system with binary system technology was established in Aydın City, Salavatlı region. And 2007, as a result of liberalization of electricity market, the Geothermal Resources and Natural Mineral Waters Law came in force. With law and with this development, there were several applications to have geothermal exploration licenses by Turkish project developers and investors. The next year, in 2008, Denizli Kızıldere geothermal field was privatized and handed over to Zorlu Enerji. 1 year later, a total of approximately 3,000 exploration and exploitation licenses were obtained, and we saw a visible increase in exploration and production activities. 2009, the first double flash power plant was established in Aydın, Germencik region with an installed capacity of 47.4 megawatts. After 2010, MTA, the Mineral Research and Exploration Institute, started farming out discovered geothermal fields for further exploration and development to the private market. In 2013, the first fruit of development activities of Kızıldere field is received. A new 80 megawatt power plant was commissioned by Zorlu Enerji. By the end of 2015, Turkey already reached 614 megawatt installed power generation capacity. The most critical information to highlight through this history is what we see all governments since the establishment of Turkish Republic has been supporting utilization of geothermal resources at various levels. And the results of this can be seen at the coming slides. But before, if we go back to the 1990s, forecasted theoretical thermal potential in the country was 2,000 megawatt thermal, where the forecast for the power generation spelled out as 1,200 megawatt E. This theoretical calculation was mainly based on limited deep wells drilled in Aegean region, but mostly on shallow wells and data of natural flows in hot springs. And today, here we have 63 cities have geothermal resources, approximately more than 400 geothermal fields discovered over 30 degrees Celsius. We have more than 1,000 geothermal spots like natural flows, hot springs. But what we see here is still 2/3 of the country own a large room for further exploration with significant geothermal manifestations. But with all the developments, we see that today the forecasted theoretical potential is 60 gigawatt, which is equal to 60 billion cubic meter per year gas. And I just want to say that in 2020, consumption of the country was 48 billion cubic meters. So 4,000, based on some other studies, 4,500 megawatt E is the power generation potential. And we have 400,000 megawatt E power generation potential from hot rock sources, either by EGS or AGS. So what you see in the map, especially in the eastern part of the country, at the city called One, for instance, we see over 100 degrees Celsius. Most of the temperatures we can recognize here is over 60 degrees, which means that definitely it's still worth it to explore more Mid-Anatolia and eastern southern part of the countries, as well as there are still untapped spots in the Aegean part of the country, where mostly we have the power generation is dense. Now let's see what is the current electricity generation installed capacity of Turkey. You see on the first slide on the left-hand side top the development of the installed capacities. Starting from, let's say, 1984 to today, the current installed capacity is over 1.6 gigawatts. If we look to the electricity generation additional capacity per year in Europe, we see Turkey has been always leading the market. In between 2012 and 2016, the additional capacity introduced by Turkey was 91% of the overall addition. On 2017, it was 84%, and on 2018, it was 82%. If we go and look to the development of world and the support of Turkey to the installed capacities are, we see it's averagely almost 10% each year. The power generation contribution comes from Turkey of its geothermal resources. So all these power plants mainly use binary ORC technology turbines. There are currently 65 units in the country, and it is dominated by BORC, but there are also some limited examples for double flash, single flash, or triple flash turbines. Now let's go to the direct use applications. What is the situation there? On the first slide, on the first figure, you see the distribution of direct use applications in megawatt thermal. So what we see is the leading market here is the thermal fluid heating, which is mostly used for the tourism purpose. It is followed by district heating, then greenhouse heating, and finally thermal facility heating. There is a small percentage which is also utilized for food drying, geothermal heat pumps, and the cooling applications. I want to start with cooling. Turkey has a warm and humid climate, especially at the western and southern part of the country. The electricity consumption increases dramatically, especially in summertime. However, there is only one example on using geothermal resource for cooling application, which is in Izmir and using absorption cooling system since 2018. But you see that Turkey's reported geothermal district heating includes 18 installations on the map, with an area of nearly more than, let's say, 16,230,000 square meter. This corresponds to the approximately 1% of total building area in the whole country. And the provincial centers uses geothermal for heating is Afyon, Kırşehir, Izmir, and its suburbs, Edremit, Bigadiç, Salihli, Sandıklı, Kızılcahamam, and it goes like that. There is maybe one interesting information to share here that Afyon, which has the world's second longest geothermal heating line after Iceland, Reykjavik, with a 32-kilometer round-trip line of this heating system, which is heating 25% of the city, and an 18-kilometer line feeds touristic facilities. Now let's go emerging area for humanity, sustainable food production, and let's link it to the greenhouses. Turkey ranks the second in Europe in terms of total production from greenhouses, and greenhouses are concentrated mostly in the southern provinces where climate conditions are more favorable. The total greenhouse area in Turkey is 790 square kilometers, and modern greenhouse cultivation accounts less than 2% of the total. As of 2019, only 3.54% of the total greenhouse area is heated, and the share of geothermal resources stands for 30% of it. The lack of development in colder climates is due to the cost of conventional energy resources. However, which is also changing recently, where we see geothermal greenhouses in Van or Ağrı cities, for instance, located in the eastern part of the country, where winter the temperature goes down averagely -10, but specifically time to time -30 degrees Celsius. Second step of the food security, we're producing It's not enough since there's a huge food waste issue worldwide as well as in Turkey. According to research done by Istanbul University, the carbon footprint accumulated by food waste throughout its life cycle, from agricultural production to waste disposal in Turkey, is 237 mt per year, which corresponds to approximately 4.5% of greenhouse gas emissions. And not only the food itself, but also the water footprint due to the food waste causes water wastage almost twice the annual amount of water distributed by municipalities. The energy footprint of food waste throughout its life cycle corresponds to 8% of Turkey's annual energy consumption. According to the research results, which do not include food waste at the customer level, 200 kilograms per year food waste is generated per person in the country, and the highest food loss occurs in the fruit and vegetable group. So today, food drying brings the importance. And with geothermal resources, it's increasing, but capacity which is using geothermal to come over this challenge is very limited, which is 9.5 megawatt thermal. The final map shows the applications areas of tourism used for health and spa. It is largely covered by the whole country, and one of the main challenges of this era is lack of a responsive legislation, unfortunately, and language capabilities of the employees to attract international customers. Now let's see the current Cascade applications. The benefit of geothermal is when you find the resource and started exploitation based on the temperature, you can use in many implementation areas, but also if you have enough resource to generate power, you still can apply Cascade applications to increase the benefits. What we have in Turkey now is a couple of companies who are power plant operators uses this resource for district heating and greenhouse production. On the upper table, you see the numbers of the utilized re-injection water. And as I mentioned at the beginning, throughout the brief history, the first Cascade application was having the carbon dioxide factory, and through the time, the number of these factories increased for all located at the sites of the geothermal power plants. How we came to here, for sure, with the incentives and supporting mechanisms provided by the governments and the policymakers. If you look at what we have today for the power generation which is framed under renewable energy resources supporting mechanism, the mechanism stands valid for the facilities which comes in operation between 1st of July 2021 till last day of 2025 to provide a feed-in tariff for 3.4 USD cent kilowatt per hour. The previous scheme of the country was 10.5, so current market prices are almost over 3.4 provided by the government. So that's why there is an ongoing discussion between the power plant operators and the relevant policymakers, and we are expecting a correction of the regulation and this supporting mechanism for the coming years. There is an additional incentive to this feed-in tariff, which if the power plant uses domestic supplies, can receive a 5 years plus incentive, which is around 7 USD cent kilowatt per hour. If we come to the greenhouse heating, you can use, which is ruled by the ministry, an establishment of geothermal resource greenhouse organized specialization zones. And here you can have the usage rights of real estate or grasslands belongs to the Treasury Ministry within the framework of certain criteria for entrepreneurs investing in geothermal greenhouses. There is also some incentives provided with low interest investment and operational loans for agricultural production by government bank. And also you can receive 50% grant support for greenhouse investments within the scope of supporting agricultural-based investments. There are also some other incentives which is provided in the country where we can list as 10% reduction on the power generation per license and license application fees comparing to the regular fees. As I mentioned, both for power generation and greenhouse heating land allocation incentives. You will have a grid connection priority. You will receive some tax incentives. There are also some incentives based on state aids at varying rates, which country is divided into 6 different regions, and depending on the social and economical conditions, the incentive scheme ranges from one side to the other. There are also some other opportunities provided by World Bank, which here I can name risk-sharing mechanism provided for the drilling operations, which share the cost of the drillings, and also a recently introduced scheme mostly for direct use applications, which includes a funding and some grant chances for feasibility studies. Now let's look a little to the energy data of the country. Here you see electricity generation and installed capacities by sources. Total installed capacity for electricity generation in Turkey is, let's say, around 100 gigawatts. And total production is shown on the screen. But here, what I want to mention is, if you look at the installed capacities and the generated power, we see that the contribution of geothermal is really significant. Despite its 1.7% share in the whole installed capacity, it produces more than twice and has a share like 3.3% in the whole generation. What we see is the increase in the electricity demand was 8% in 2021, and this unfortunately covers also the slowness created by the pandemic effect. So considering this, share of electricity in final energy consumption was around 20%. And what is forecasted that share in the energy consumption will increase to 40% till 2040. So here maybe we need to look a little to the external cost of the fossil fuel use on different types and see what the country is spending on. So what you see in the pie chart in the first one, under the breakdown of the external cost of the data of 2018, is 56% of external cost of fossil fuel use arises from coal usage. And this is mostly uses for power generation and heating operation, which is 5.4 billion euros per year. This is followed by 33% for the petroleum products, which is the rest 4.3 billion euros. If you look, power generation constitutes about 30% of the external cost of fossil fuels, which is followed by the 25% of the industry and the buildings 17%, which is a huge amount of money, which is 1.6 billion euros. So we need to do something, and for sure there is no challenge without a solution. The questions here we ask is, do you want to fight to keep climate change in control? Do you want to have an independent economy, and do you want to generate more green jobs for people? So why not geothermal with minimum carbon footprint, which is sustainable, which you can use with Cascade and hybrid opportunities and simply available everywhere? And let's come back to the forecasted theoretical new potential of the country, which is 60 gigawatt in total. So installed capacity for direct use applications, it's still more than 90% outstanding. For the power generation capacity, it's still 53% outstanding. And for the hot rack potential, we haven't touched any of it. where there are developing technologies letting us to utilize this resource, which is EGS, what I can say is open loop systems, or the AGS for the closed loop systems. What we will do is, as Enerchange and together with Geothermal Haberler, bringing the worldwide news to the country and bring all operators, geothermal technology suppliers, green energy investors, financial sectors, and academia together to share what's happening in the world, the developments, and what we can do to utilize and maximize our benefit for this outstanding untapped resource. And we are going to organize an International Geothermal Congress and exhibition on September in Izmir, Turkey. I would like to share a little information about it before I'm coming up to my last slide, let's say. What we are going to discuss during this Congress is the impact financing with World Bank, Turkish Construction Bank, and Turkish Investment Bank. And we will see the trends worldwide and their applicability in Turkey to enhance geothermal developments. We will touch heating and cooling applications, where we definitely need to focus to keep the climate change in control and benefit from this green heating and cooling applications resource to have a cleaner air to breathe. We will talk about hybrid and cascade applications. We will talk about power plant technologies for the electricity production. We will have region overviews, and of course, we'll touch these new technologies like EGS and EGS. And also, maybe the first this year, we will discuss how we can utilize the geothermal potential of oil and gas fields. It stands as another critical issue for everyone. To decarbonize oil fields may provide huge benefit to decarbonization efforts worldwide. And with my last slide, you see on the screen the draft overview of the program. We will have 3 main sessions under developing technologies, utilization, and geothermal updates. In drilling, we will discuss artificial intelligence applications and the developments in data collection, especially during drilling operations. We will see how we can extract the heat everywhere, and we will have presentations on the innovative approaches for scaling, art of reinjection, extraction of lithium and other renewable minerals and metals from geothermal brine, and how are the new progress in the well recovery and stimulation. Under the utilization, we will talk about direct use implications in country with the developed industrial organized zones. Again, we will touch the hybrid applications, and we will have a session about the green hydrogen and lithium potential of Turkey. As I mentioned, we will look in detail the geothermal potential of Turkish oil fields with presentations of how we can repurpose them and the possibilities of cogeneration. In the geothermal countries, we will have, of course, the updates from Turkey, Europe, Middle East, and Africa. As I mentioned, we will have a financial session, and in the end, TÜBİTAK will inform us about the European Union Horizon 2023 funding schemes, and we will have some panels by our supported associations. And thank you very much. I hope that this has been enough information to provide you some intel about Turkey, what we have, and what we can have more in future. Alex.
Thank you very much, Cannur. Great overview on Turkey and both history and current status. So thank you so much. For the audience, you have in the right-hand side on the GoToWebinar control panel, you have the opportunity to ask questions. So if you wanted to throw a few questions to Cannur, you can do so in the question part. So please add this. We'll try to answer as many questions as we can. But maybe to start off, maybe a few questions from my end. Cannur, one of the big drivers in Turkey had been the feed-in tariffs that kind of really pushed geothermal in Turkey. They were quite favorable. They were denominated in US dollars, so making them very attractive to several players joining the geothermal sector and developing projects. Could you maybe touch upon a little bit kind of what are the current players and why they ended up in doing geothermal, for example, like Zorlu?
Yes, for sure. Thank you, Alex. As you see in the brief history since, let's say, 1920s, in fact, there were an understanding of the importance of utilization of the geothermal resource. But coming to the 2007, and the government of the day wanted to liberalize electricity market and introduce the geothermal specific law. And after it came forth, definitely this created an appetite for the Turkish investors and geothermal developers like Zorlu, because all these companies, let's say, forecasted that energy will be the area definitely they need to take place in for future, because it will be the most critical elements for the sustainability of everything we touch. After the law, and a couple of years after the law, there has been some challenges on the receiving funds from the banks, because as all we know, the high risk of discovering a geothermal resource stands at the exploration phase, where you need to spend quite amount of money for the drilling operations, especially besides the previous feasibilities you need to do. And still there is a question mark if you can develop this field, you invest all that money or not. So to encourage this a little and to generate an appetite for the companies interested in energy generation, the government introduced this feed-in tariff, which was 10.5 USD cents kilowatt per hour those days. And it was really, those days was above 3 or 4 times over the average market price, and was very welcome by the sector. Then Turkey made a record in the history by having the fastest developing installed capacity from geothermal resources worldwide. After coming to the end of the introduced scheme with the time limitation provided, the Turkish investors waited around 2 to 3 years for government to come up with a new one. And the new one introduced a couple of years ago, unfortunately with a lower expectation than the market. So since then, there has been a slowness on the ongoing investments. However, through the associations active in the market, I know that there are current and tough discussions ongoing between the operators and the policymakers, and everybody is expecting an update on these numbers to again enhance to geothermal development. Even beside this low incentive scheme, I can say, in line a bit with the Turkish economy and the worldwide changing energy costs, the energy free market prices in the country increased a lot. So that's why it's still a feasible investment to generate power from geothermal resources. I hope this clarifies your question.
It does. But maybe then going forward, I mean, there has now been a change in the feed-in tariffs. I mean, it's been a long time in the making. Did it have an impact on the interest of further development in Turkey, or where do you think things stand?
The time where the market was waiting for the announcement of this new scheme, which we know for now, definitely slow down the process. Because the biggest issue about this is when you want to have a fundable project and you start discussions with the bank, the best case scenario to convince the finance guys is to have a guarantee. And that guarantee comes from the government, of course, provides a relief area for the financiers. So till we have the new scheme, all the companies wanted to wait and see what will be the new number to be announced and how they can economically make it, let's say, viable, their projects, and what will be their IRR in the end, which also defines the capacities they want to establish. After having the new scheme's announcement, there has been again some, let's say, movement in the market. So we had some additional capacities, especially the projects were on hold on the development side of the story came in life. But still, again, there are a couple of ongoing projects from the drilling point of view, especially some in the eastern part of the country. But still, that slowness, that acceleration we had in the beginnings of 2000s or 2010s stands too far, because with the, I mean, not only the inflation challenges we are receiving worldwide, the energy considerations, question marks in mind, and the current difficult economical conditions in Turkey led everyone to stop a little and to think about what will be the future and what would be the capacity of their investment.
Okay, then maybe going forward, I mean, you made a fantastic overview of the potential of the country, and if one looks at the temperature sources, etc., one sees is that there's a great potential across the country. Question though is that why wasn't there developed more? I mean, it's already grown faster than any other country so far, but what's holding it back in a sense of even expanding beyond the current like 1600 megawatts?
Maybe it's better if I explain it over this map. Yeah, this map I have showed. The first discovered fields were located in the western part of the country, in the Aegean part, with higher manifestations. So this was also the area where MTA focused for the exploration studies. And after geothermal law came in force, these were the first areas where everybody was quite confident that if they have a license there, definitely they will be successful in the end. And the first farm out concessions by MTA and the specific applications of licenses danced in the Aegean region of the country. So the main investors of, I can say, like 40 companies now active in the geothermal market as developer had several licenses in this area, and all the projects and their, let's say, capitals were focused to develop Aegean part of the country. And as much as we hear more good news, as much as the focus of the discovered area enhanced more. But also those days, the main focus was to generate power. And all technical studies and the academicians were referring that the high power, for the power generation, the high potential stands in the western part of the country for the hydrothermal resources. If we look at the socio-economical level, also the western part of the country is relatively more developed comparing to eastern part of the country. So it is easy to have facilities in there. Not from grid connection point of view, but for all kind of operations, it eases your life and maybe a bit more handleable to decrease your exploration feasibility costs. But as soon as the installed capacity at the western part come to a bit a satisfaction level, the people are now started looking other parts of the country and say, well, maybe there are still potential over there. Because if you look at the map, the high temperatures we see comes from the well data is all still limited with the western part. But there are now studies starting in the eastern part, because now everybody has tasted the good of geothermal resources, let's say, not only for power generation, but also for heating and cooling. It provides comfort to the end consumers, users, and also for the greenhouse applications. It gives you a chance to triple your production capacity per year and the capability of cultivation in harsh environments. So most probably in the upcoming, let's say 5 years, we will have more discovery news from the Middle Anatolia and eastern part of the country.
Thank you, Cannur. Now getting to the questions here of from the audience. There's a question: is there some kind of like average number of cost per megawatt installed in Turkey? Would there be a number that you could share? Circa?
Yeah. From hydrothermal resources, let's say, I mean, not for EGS and AGS, but you can say that per megawatt you spend around 3 million USD, 3.2 million USD, something like that. And here, the depth of the wells, let's say approximately around 3,000 meters.
Okay, let's go a bit further here. I mean, some of this question are maybe too specific and technical, but here the question kind of, what's the maximum temperature of a well in Turkey at this point?
What
the
is
highest
the
temperature achieved by a well?
The highest temperature record in the Turkey is from mid-Anatolia, and it's 367 degrees or 80 degrees. I mean, 370 degrees Celsius for a depth at 4,000, a couple of hundred meters.
What geology is this? Is it granite, or what type of geology can you find at this site?
At that depth, yes, you're in granites, and most probably that region is more proper to utilize this enhanced geothermal systems, because the elements for producing from hydrothermal point of view, it's a limited from the geothermal brine and steam point of view.
Here another question. Well, thank you, Cannur. Here another question. We have seen this in the US as well. These efforts to say that, you know, replacing coal-fired power plants with geothermal. Would there be an option like that in Turkey?
Could be an option, exactly. However, I can say that there is neither a focus nor study on it yet.
Maybe further here. Yeah, this is actually a good question. I think that also applies to other geographics here. But given the geothermal potential in Turkey, ground source heat pumps and heat pumps in general and heat exchange system, why hasn't it taken a much larger part of the domestic heating and cooling market so far?
Well, this is a very good question, in fact, and this is also a question I really have no valid answer. I think one of the reasons maybe is the geothermal heating mentality or focus in Turkey started really with using the geothermal resource itself. So ground source heat pumps is a bit different than utilizing this hot geothermal brine, and the brine was accessible in shallower depths all around the regions. So the first focus was that how we can utilize this resource. However, nowadays there has been huge discussions on it, and I see that there is an increasing interest. So I receive also a couple of interest and questions from construction companies or the people around the country, let's say. And that is the reason, in fact, in the IGC, upcoming IGC, we are trying to organize a heating and cooling workshop a day before the Congress, where we will introduce and welcome big construction companies and civil engineers and mechanical engineers and other stakeholders of the market to discuss how we can make it happen and how we can increase the implementation of ground source heat pump as well as the utilizing the other way of the geothermal resource. And most probably the answer will be more clear after this workshop.
Excellent, excellent. So what further here? Okay, so now the questions coming in as usual. Could you, that's a technical question, but can you comment on well production, artesian versus lifted flow related to geology across Turkey?
Sorry, Alex, can you repeat?
So here, basically the well production in geothermal, you know, is there a natural flow to the surface, or how much pumping is being done as part of the operations in Turkey?
Minus plus, I can say like 90% of the power plants were using this artesian power while they are producing geothermal brine. However, in the late years, like last 3 to 4 years, I can say that the pressure of the reservoirs go down. So because it has been also a time for the companies to become familiar how you can manage a reservoir. So there has been a learning process for everyone. So we were quite fast in the worldwide recording, developing a huge number of capacity, but this also brings so many lessons learned in a short time of period, which unfortunately for most of the sites ended up with a pressure decrease in the reservoirs. So nowadays, there are a few fields left with artesian power, but like now, 80% of the power plants are producing with pumps.
Okay. Yeah, question kind of how, let's say, without feed-in tariffs in Turkey, how would geothermal be competitive with solar and wind? Are there any comparisons, or?
If you compare the feed-in tariff provided for those are, I can say minus plus the same amount. However, here the challenge is when you, the initial cost you need for solar and wind is totally different that you need for geothermal. So that's why if you want to trigger the market in the balance, you need to give more to geothermal to just to encourage investors to take the initial exploration risk. But going back, looking at the numbers and the final situation, I exactly don't remember the numbers by my heart for the wind and solar, but there are, I think, a couple of USD cents difference between them.
There was also this interesting slide that you showed. And this is, I think, something that is maybe in Turkey more obvious than in other countries, but the fuel cost of current baseload energy sources like coal and natural gas clearly has a huge impact, and it's something that's been always let's say, presented by both the Turkish government and the Turkish energy market. I mean, particularly with increasing energy prices all over Europe and I guess also inflation in Turkey. I mean, this is a big issue. So is that also a driver why, let's say, the government kind of pushes a natural resource like geothermal that could provide baseload?
Exactly. It was the idea from the beginning to support, I mean, the initial idea of the government was to support all domestic resources. Unfortunately, it includes also coal, because for developing countries, I mean, you need to use your own resource to strengthen your economy somehow. But geothermal took a great part of it, I can say, and was welcomed well. And I know currently today is to utilize those outstanding amounts which I showed here, including the hot rack systems. The Ministry of Energy and MTA are having regular meetings with a couple of academicians and institutions to see how they can also now generate power by EGS and AGS systems for now. So that's why MTA, for instance, for the end of this year and the upcoming year, has new plans to increase drilling operations to discover more fields in geothermal. So all in line with that, in the coming years, we will see more, and hopefully that we will see a different bar chart on this table, that the cost of fossil fuel will be definitely lowered and will be introduced more domestic green resources to the system, hopefully.
Thank you. Next question here, repurposing former hydrocarbon wells for geothermal. Is there anything like this being developed or being worked on in Turkey, or is there interest to do that?
There is no repurposing studies ongoing in Turkey yet. And there are a couple of questions about that, is that repurposing, I mean, you need to look at the feasibility, because of the lifetime of the well would not be that economical sometimes if you use a current well again or not. However, there has been studies going back to 10 years ago from the academician's point of view, looking at the geothermal potential of the oil fields in the country. So if, and there are some, I can say, yes, interests from the oil companies, how they can use their heat resource in their oil concessions. Can it be with repurposing? I don't know. We need to check the feasibility, but it can go with mostly discussed like cogeneration, and maybe by drilling new wells, because the most critical thing in developing a geothermal site is the lack of knowledge about subsurface. But for an oil concession, this is not a question mark, because they know their fields very well, especially in the long-term operational ones. So that's why I can say more than repurposing, other alternative ways are in consideration by oil companies.
Okay, then we're getting closer to the end, so I'll don't use you too long here. Here are also some questions, of course, to the IGC Turkey event. One of the questions was about the cost to attend. I think it's good to say that there's an early bird registration opportunity until August, but you find all these informations on the Event Direct website. It's igc-turkey.com, and you can find then more details on the website. And the prices you can find on the front page of the website. But make sure to register. I think
and
that
they can also email me for further clarifications about IGC.
Yeah. Okay. Well, then maybe let's hear one as a concrete question as well, and that's part. There's a session in the Congress here on well recovery, and the question basically well recovery and stimulation. So, are there a large number of wells that require revitalization or could be revitalized for generation?
Yes, exactly. There are, but unfortunately, this is a bit too technical for me to answer.
Okay, fair enough. And I think then probably the last question here, and then we close it for the weekend. The question is the kind of like the average depth of the wells for geothermal power generation in Turkey, and then maybe what's the deepest and most shallow as well? Do you know?
Yeah, I can say minus plus. If you would like to have, let's say, a wellhead temperature around 150, 180 degrees Celsius, the approximately depth you need to go is 2,500 meters average. If you want to get more heat, you need to go deeper, like 3,500 meters. But there are also wells drilled with 170, 74 wellhead temperatures at 500 meters. So it's a bit in line with the geology, and it's, let's say, correspondence against the fault structure tectonic regime. So you can find really warm temperatures closer to the surface or more hotter degrees of Celsius in the deeper ones. But the well ranges in operation for power generation is between 500 meters to 3,500 meters.
Perfect. I think with that, Cannur, I think we will leave you into the weekend and our audience as well. I would like to thank you very, very much for this really helpful and informative presentation and overview, and taking the time to answer all these questions. We definitely missed a few of the questions here, but I guess it's a matter of time and maybe two technical questions, but thank you very much also to the audience. And Cannur, maybe a few last words on the Congress, and
Yeah, thank you very much, Alex, also for the opportunity. It was a pleasure to share what's happening and what can we do more. And I for sure invite everyone, and looking forward to meet them all at IGC Turkey 2022. We will discuss in deep how we can make really all this outstanding potential, how we can get the maximize our benefits for this outstanding potential, what we can do, how we can do together, and they will find definitely all answers to their all deep technical questions by the experts.
Perfect. But with that, Cannur, thank you very much. Thank you to the audience. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you at our next webinar in 2 weeks from now. Thank you very much, and thank you, Cannur.